The Tale of the Human-Faced Tumor. Junichiro Tanizaki once wrote a story about a human-faced tumor. I happen to possess the original manuscript, which I obtained by chance and have kept to this day. The story is about a woman who appeared in a motion picture. Though it holds little literary value, the material is quite peculiar. I suspected there might be some source material behind it, and while I was casually keeping an eye out, I came across a record that seemed relevant when I was researching stories from various provinces, going through various essays. This record appeared in a book called Karyo Zatsuki and was about an event that happened to Kaoka Hachiro, who later became the head of the Kaoka dance school, during his journey to Kyoto, on the Kiso Road. Autumn had deepened in the Kiso Valley. The horse carrying Hachiro was climbing a gently sloping rocky path. To the right of the road was a deep, deep gorge where the sound of water could be heard far below. It was already the 8th hour of the day, around 2 p.m., and the mountains across the valley were bathed in the cold rays of the setting sun, creating a tapestry of autumn colors. The mountains on either side, rising like the inner edges of a mortar, stood tall as if propping up the blue sky like folding screens. The autumn wind blew, making the nearby leaves rustle and scatter. The wind descended into the gorge, almost as if it were silencing the sound of the water below. Along the road, there were places where the cry of deer could be heard. Hachiro chatted with the horseman while casting his gaze over the surrounding scenery. The road eventually led to the top of a small pass. A cedar forest that stretched from the ridge on the right side extended right up to the edge of the road. The ridge alone was illuminated by sunlight, while the midsection to the base of the mountain lay in shadow. The cedar trees at the base appeared dark blue and cold. A man wearing straw sandals emerged from the forest below. He briefly stopped to look at the traveler, and then, as if Hachiro were someone he had been waiting for, he quickly approached him. Here is the English translation of the text you provided. Excuse me, might you be Master Kaoka Hachiro? Hachiro was startled to hear his own name. Indeed, I am Kaoka. And who might you be? Ah, yes, it is Master Kaoka. I've been waiting here since yesterday for your arrival. Hachiro was filled with suspicion. Still wearing his light blue half-coat, with his right hand resting on the edge of his bamboo hat, he stared intently at the man's face. You may find this hard to believe, but my master has been ill for many years. He was once a well-known samurai in a certain domain, but he contracted an unknown illness and resigned from his position, retreating to this forest. It's been nearly 20 years now. He has become weak and frail, and his life is uncertain even by tomorrow. Upon hearing that you would be passing through here, he expressed a dying wish, to see one final dance from you, Master Kaoka. He sent me to wait for your arrival. I humbly ask that you stay with us tonight and grant my master's last request, even if it may inconvenience you. Hachiro couldn't help but feel uneasy, but hearing that a noble samurai's dying wish was at stake, he couldn't refuse. Very well, let us go. Hachiro dismounted his horse, paid the promised fare to the horseman, and followed the man in straw sandals. After passing through the dimly lit cedar forest for about 10 cho, a traditional unit of distance, they emerged into a valley hollow. A small stream flowed beneath their feet, with an earthen bridge spanning over it. On the other side of the bridge stood a grayish rock formation. The man in straw sandals crossed the earthen bridge and led Hachiro onward. A thatched roof house was hidden in the shadow of the rock. The entrance was bordered by a fence made of dead branches, entwined with red-leafed vines. The man in straw sandals entered through the gate. At the entrance, 2 retainers wearing hakama sat waiting. We have brought the honored guest you have been waiting for, the man in straw sandals said, glancing back at Hachiro. The two retainers bowed respectfully and said, "We are grateful for your trouble, please, do come right in." Hachiro untied the straps of his waroji, straw sandals, and stepped onto the bamboo porch. The man in straw sandals had already disappeared. The two retainers walked ahead of Hachiro. Unlike the narrow entrance, the interior opened into a spacious room lined with blue tatami mats, where weapons such as swords, spears, and bows were displayed along the walls. Inside the room, several people, 3 or 5, sat watching Hachiro pass by. After crossing about 3 spaces of the wide room, they stepped out onto a porch with bamboo railings. In the garden, which had an air of solitude, a small thatched roof shed was visible in front of them. There was a stream that flowed through the thicket, crossing over stepping stones before disappearing again into the trees. The retainers descended into the garden and donned their geta, traditional wooden sandals. "Please come this way," one of them said. Hachiro followed suit, putting on his geta and stepping across the stones. The sun had set, and a cold wind was blowing. As the retainer approached the porch of the detached house, he bent slightly at the waist. "I report that the honored guest you have been waiting for has arrived." A voice came from inside, coughing and clearing its throat. "Bring him in." The retainer stepped onto the porch and slid the shoji, sliding door, open to the sides. Inside the narrow room, designed in the style of a tea room, a man with long, thin, yellowish hair leaned against something resembling a kotatsu, a low table with a heater underneath. He appeared to be around 50 years old. At a glance, Hachiro thought that this must be the ailing samurai afflicted with an unknown disease. When the sick man saw Hachiro, he offered a lonely smile. "Welcome, please come this way." Although the voice was weak, there was a certain noble grace to it that could not be contested. Hachiro quietly stepped into the room. "It is my first time meeting you. I understand you have been ill for many years. It has been 20 years of suffering. As you can see, I have grown weak, and I had resigned myself to the fact that this year might be my last. However, upon hearing rumors that you would be coming to the capital, I desired to see one last dance as a memory of this world, and I asked my family to make that request. I am grateful that you have come. I am thankful that you would request my humble performance to such a degree. If it is not too much trouble, may I ask what illness you are suffering from? If I am to impose on you in this way, I am prepared to reveal both the nature of my illness and my circumstances. But let us first allow for some time to prepare properly." Saying this, the sick man turned to his retainer. "Serve our guests some refreshments." Hachiro was accompanied by the retainers back to the main house, where he was treated to sake before being sent back to the detached house. In the detached house, the sick man sat in solitude, illuminated by the dim light of a short lantern. "I am grateful for the unexpected hospitality today," Hachiro said, showing his flushed face from the sake. The sick man appeared somewhat pleased as he responded, "As you can see, it is a humble mountain dwelling, and I regret that there is nothing here to satisfy a guest's palate." He then turned to the retainer beside him and added, "Now, as I begin to share my story, you all may excuse yourselves." The two retainers who had accompanied Hachiro left the room. Upon seeing them depart, the sick man moved slightly and smiled. He was wearing something resembling nightclothes. "Please do not ask for my name or the name of my domain. Even if you were to hear it, it would hold no interest for you, so I kindly ask that you refrain from inquiring. If you wish for a name, you may call me Yamanchu Saruman or Shika Goro, let your imagination take it from there." The sick man smiled again. "At that time, I was about 20 years old, and I had a high stipend granted to me by my ancestors, along with a favorable reputation among my lord. My position was envied by others in the same house. However, perhaps it was some kind of preordained agreement from a previous life, I suddenly found my attention drawn to one of my family's servants. It happened to be an off day, and I spent the entire day reading picture books in my room. They were so interesting that I recall continuing to read them after dinner. It was summer, with the evening moonlight shining down, and frogs croaking in the garden's pond. Before I realized it, I found myself in the garden, strolling aimlessly about. Without thinking, I glanced back toward my room and saw a beautiful girl, hanging up a mosquito net over her bed. Her delicate, slender white hands stood out like a relief against the light of the lantern. I felt as if I were in a dream and wandered back into my room. She had been a servant hired just a few days earlier, and since I had not yet taken a formal wife, I began to dote on her that night. However, I soon found myself regretting that decision. This is to say that women have a deep nature of jealousy. Whenever I would exchange a word with another servant, she would cry out in resentment and jealousy, and soon this became known throughout the residence, worrying even the elderly servants who had been with the household for generations. When I tried to distance myself from her, she would act like a madwoman, capable of causing any sort of trouble. I was left with no choice but to calm her down. When I fell ill and had to lie down, she would come to my bedside day and night, resentful and angry, not allowing me to sleep. I became annoyed and wished to drive her away. However, she would again come to my side, gripping my collar and starting her complaints. In forgetting my illness, I pushed her away and stood up, striking her 3 or 4 times with a fan that was at my pillow. She became furious and clung to my sleeve, crying, "If you hate me so much, then kill me. Come on, kill me, please." In my youthful stubbornness, I said, "Fine, if you want me to kill you so badly, I will fulfill your wish." Without even showing a hand to draw my sword from its scabbard, I swung down. Her head flew forward, but when I looked at the spot where it fell, her face was turned toward me, smiling as if she were still alive. I thought it impossible for someone I had killed to be smiling. This must be a delusion. I steeled my heart and took a closer look, yet still, her face continued to smile. Hachiro felt a chill down his back. He thought the light of the short candle was damp. I also felt as if I had awakened from a dream, regretting that I had killed the woman. But it was already too late to take it back. I consulted with the elderly servants and had her buried the same day. However, when night came, I developed a fever and felt an intense pain around my groin. When I looked, a lump had formed, which grew larger and took on a strange shape. At first, I applied medicine and prayed, but since there were no signs of improvement, I tried to cut it away with a knife and attempted to burn it off with moxibustion, but it kept returning to its original form, and I was unable to remove it. Thus, I claimed it was an incurable disease and have been hiding here for over 20 years. This has worn me out both mentally and physically. At least I wish to request a single performance of the song from here, hoping to die without regrets, and so I boldly asked for your presence." As the patient spoke, he looked sadly at Hachiro, whose eyes were filled with tears. "If you wish for my inexperienced art, I will show you tonight until morning," Hachiro said. That night, he performed the Kalka dance before the patient. The patient watched happily. 6 or 7 servants also gathered, pleased to see their master's joyful face, and when Hachiro had danced until he was exhausted, dawn broke. "Thank you very much. My heart has been unburdened after 20 years, I have no more regrets," the patient said to Hachiro, and then turned to his servants. "You all go ahead and prepare to entertain our guest. I have something to show him before then." Once the servants had left, the patient again addressed Hachiro. "After your meal, please rest leisurely before you depart. I will instruct my family to see you off as far as you wish. Afterward, the patient knelt and moved away from the hearth, letting go of the nightgown he had been wearing. Please look at the lump I mentioned last night. Saying this, he lifted the garment from his right knee, exposing the area around his groin. Hachiro, intrigued by the tumor that could not be erased by prayers, medicine, scraping, or cauterization, focused his gaze intently on the inner thigh. The long, narrow face of a yellow-haired woman was vividly depicted, head toward the knee. Please look closely, this is the face of the woman I killed, the sick man said coldly, turning his gaze toward Hachiro. Hachiro held his breath and remained still. Keep this strange tumor in mind for your future studies, he continued. Hachiro silently bowed in acknowledgement. After a brief rest, during which Hachiro was served breakfast, he prepared to depart. The sick man instructed one of his attendants to bring a fragrant box and an inkstone, placing them before Hachiro. This is a trivial item, but please accept it as a memento, he said. Hachiro received the gifts and, accompanied by more than 10 household members, set off toward the capital. However, he felt a lingering concern for the strange tumor of the sick man, wishing to stop by again on his return journey to see him once more. Unfortunately, due to unavoidable circumstances, he traveled back along the Tokaido and ultimately did not have the opportunity to meet the sick man again.